All right, 4 people online, 10 people in real life. Okay, everyone, God bless. Thank you so much for coming so we can have the pleasure to discuss one of the guys' lectures. Um, there's a quick meditation, it's only one paragraph. The meditations that the guide has are active meditations. They are an attempt to what the guide calls mold the soul substance. So I'm going to read one short meditation. I will be stronger than my destructiveness and will not be hampered by it. I determine that my life will be at its best and fullest, and that I will and can overcome the blocks in me that make me want to remain unhappy. This determination of mine will bring in the higher powers that will make me capable of experiencing more and more bliss because I can let go of the doubtful pleasure of being negative, which I now fully recognize. What do I really feel at this moment about this or that issue? In what respect am I dissatisfied? What is it that I may be disregarding? I know I can and will have such and such, even if it is not realizable right now in this or that specific form. I trust the universe and my own good will sufficiently that I can wait and will strengthen myself along the way to cope well with the temporary frustration of this desire.
Is that final lecture?
This is not sure from which lecture it is, but there's a number of lectures that I kind of compiled into when the guide says meditate on this or think about this. I've combined them into a group of sayings or group of paragraphs. I could send it to everyone if you like, send everybody a copy. So this lecture, of course, is really about turning your consciousness in the right direction, having the courage to make conscious decisions to activate the power that we have in a nutshell. All right, so can everyone quickly introduce themselves?
Hello, Juan. I think most of you know me already.
Okay. Grace,
Hello, I'm Grace.
Regina, Joel, Marianne, Barcelona,
I'm Mary.
longtime Pathwork helper, Chad,
I'm Chad. I am Kevin.
Kevin, Barbara, Tracy, and myself. I wanted to start our discussion tonight with the spiritual laws cards, which are beautiful cards I've talked about before. These were made by 4 Brazilian Pathwork helpers, and there are 36 of them. And the second one is called the Law of Consciousness. I figured I'd read that. It's got this beautiful illustration.
So that's when we embrace ourselves.
Yeah, cradling. I mean,
Cradling ourselves, right.
Nature, because I see it as
I think it's like her thoughts are connected to the universe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I feel
Yeah.
the same way.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
Like we are all one in a way.
Yeah, in other words, nature we embrace nature and our consciousness flowers. We could say that.
It's through our efforts that we can see that.
like when we embrace ourselves, like accept ourselves first, yeah, that's when a lot of that starts to grow from it, like the tree with different branches, we see different perspectives, and it all becomes one.
I want to read a meditation from the second card, which is called the Law of Consciousness. And this is what it says. Becoming conscious is a gradual and constant growth process that enables us to better understand the underlying principles that rule human relationships, the soul, and the universe. This process is not about getting rid of the problems, but rather of establishing their meaning. The path is mostly a process of becoming aware of those deeper levels of reality. At every difficulty, you must calmly accept your present reality with no excuses or justifications, keeping a compassionate attitude toward yourself at every step and at every realization. When you take your awareness into the dark corners of the self, you free obstructed aspects into flow and release new vital energy into your life. The greater your knowledge of the self, the greater your sense of integrity, respect, and connection with the cosmic force. I'm the law of consciousness.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, powerful.
So as I said, these cards were made by 4 Brazilian Pathwork helpers. And I got this set at the Pathwork convention that we had in Portugal. So I wanted to share them with you guys and see if anyone would like to read a card or two that might seem to particularly move you or interest you. Resonate, that's the word I'm looking for. So let me pass some cards around. Everybody take a look at a
There are
few.
no accidents with which ones you choose.
Correct.
Or which ones choose you.
Love is the most powerful thing in the universe. So
No, this is because I
crazy.
literally tell my grandchildren this
Yes.
thousands of times already, and they're only 6 and 3. Love is the most important thing. That's why I always tell them, love is at the end. Love is the most important thing. Well, it is, of course, because it's so powerful. Love is truth. Honesty is the rarest and most needed form of love. Wow. In the interactions between human beings, yeah. Honesty. Love is expressed as your real self. Lack of fulfillment is a sign that you haven't learned yet to love, to be honest with yourself, and to live in reality. You must empty yourself of misperceptions, defenses, and resistance in order to allow love to fill yourself. In the deepest core of the self, love is always the issue. Do not question love. Question your doubts. Seek your fears, and you shall understand your uncertainties. Where there is no fear of loving, there is no hesitation. Love does not dwell in the ego. As long as you fear letting go of the small ego, you will not surrender to the bliss of union. Loving is a feeling process that must be allowed by the wisdom of your inner will. Love is a higher form of intelligence, and in its totality, love is the greatest spiritual experience. I am the law of love.
That's it.
So how do you reflect on that, Trace?
No, I always Chad knows. I just think at the end of the day, love is that love is truth. It's God. Love is the most important thing. I mean, with Corinthians 13, right? It's just like at the end of the day, if you could stay connected to love, you're gonna be okay. It's when you slip off of that,
I'll buy that.
right?
What I like is it's honesty is the most important thing,
Well-
because for me, I have an issue sometimes with this whole idea of love is the most important thing, because I feel like a lot of people give lip service to that without the actual
Action behind it,
behind it.
which starts with
So-
honesty.
Yeah, so that's why
You can't love anything, including yourself,
Uh-huh.
without being honest. That's why self-knowing is so important. You have to be able to face yourself and to know yourself. And then in doing that, honestly knowing that, then you can be, on the right way. At least playing in the right sandbox. I mean, we got a long ways to go, but at least you're in the right sandbox, right?
Balance I
Yes.
really read about, because it was
Yes.
a point there that kind of stuck with me. When you read one of the last
The law of
documents.
consciousness.
Yeah, the law of consciousness. What it says, the more, and this thing stuck with me, the more self-knowledge that you have, the more you'll be able to connect with that divine consciousness.
Yeah.
Something like
Yeah,
that.
we could what?
The more self-knowledge that
Yeah.
you have, the more you'll be able to connect with divine consciousness.
Oh.
So to me, that was like, wow, that's awesome there, because as you know, like most of like Socrates and all the philosophers, and we know that through Pathwork that how important it is to, I mean, it boils down to that, to knowing yourself.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
It's
The more you get to know you know yourself, not only the negative aspect of yourself, but the positive, all the immense power that you have,
Right.
and all the blockages that are prohibiting you
Exactly.
from becoming this power that you are.
Right, that's really what the
You know?
lecture is.
Yeah. So yeah. I just wanted to
Okay,
use it.
so,
Sure.
yeah,
And the one sentence or the one paragraph that went right in is the last one. It says, you can all discover the truth of the power of your consciousness by making the commitment now, again and again, to be in truth with yourself in your daily concerns, in your reactions, in experiences that leave you puzzled, confused, or disturbed. And I got the card that says, I am the law of living in truth.
Wow. Wow.
No coincidence
Well done.
there.
do you want to read it? The
Sure.
card?
Sure.
All right.
Truth is a constant movement of self-renovation. It flows calmly, imposes nothing, and allows you to connect to the universal powers. Every opening towards truth releases more spiritual energy, leading you into being who you truly are. You have to invest in truth, even if it seems humiliating, to accept your own limitations, to descend from your defensive superiority and be like everyone else. The first step towards love is to face what lives in you. That is how you contribute to building trust in the integrity of people and the world. Nurturing the highest level of self-revelation is key to the continuous process of purification and transformation in your path. You activate your divine nature in every honest step you take. I am the law of living in truth.
Wow. It's a good one.
Every experience is a consequence of a previous.
What's the, what's it
What's the
called?
law?
The law of cause and effect.
Hmm.
And it says every experience is the consequence of a previous event, even if you are unaware of the connection. Every difficulty in your life has been self-inflicted. The more unconscious the act, the greater the consequence. When you seek the cause within yourself, you will find your participation in all of creation and your misunderstanding of reality. As the origin of outer events is found in inner reality, life becomes a benign energy that is coherent, fair, and safe. The more aware you are, the more you can perceive cause and effect in the subtler levels and become conscious of interconnections that did not seem to exist at first. You are the cause that creates the effect. When consciousness is fully impregnated by God, there is no longer a distance between cause and effect. God is the cause and the effect at the same time. I am the law of cause and effect.
Well, I think that gets very close to this lecture,
Quite profound.
really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First paragraph, the guide says, of course, gives us blessings, as he always does in every lecture. I wish to deal with the phenomenon of consciousness, which is so extremely difficult to explain to the human mind. For the human state of consciousness is still an extremely limited one. I think what that means is that eventually, at some point, it will not be extremely limited. This limitation that we experience is something that we will eventually grow out of. So we're in the middle between a state of unconsciousness and a state of super universal consciousness. So we're, as people, human beings, we're in the middle of a continuum. And the guy talks about 3 stages of consciousness, 3 levels. The unconsciousness of matter that only can be impressed upon or used or molded, has no self-awareness. Animals and plants that also don't have self-awareness and don't exist in time, the guide says. Then there's us. We exist in time. We have self-awareness. We have consciousness of our feelings and motivations. We have the ability to make choices that animals and plants don't have the ability to do. And then the third level, there is a level of universal consciousness where the guide says, I think in one paragraph, that we recognize that our self is in everything. Everything. We feel the connections with everything. So I'll just go over some of the concepts and we can talk about them. Guide says, I mean, consciousness is often seemed to be a phenomenon that's only associated with the brain. You know, if you don't have a brain, then you don't have any consciousness. Things that don't have brains don't have consciousness. They're not self-aware. The Buddhists say every sentient being. Is sentience consciousness? I'm not sure. I mean, is the sentience of a plant or an animal consciousness? Not in the same way that we're conscious. Now the guide says, another friend of ours is joining us. Deborah. The guide says, basically consciousness is in everything. Wherever there's energy, there's consciousness. And there's energy in everything, from matter to living things. I suppose that even in stars, there's consciousness because there's so much energy there. Every thought is energy. You experience this energy as feeling. There he says, there cannot be a thought, even the most mechanical, dead, sterile, cut-off thought that does not also contain feeling. That's a very interesting concept, I think, how every thought contains feeling. And then he makes a distinction between what he calls abstract thought and cut-off thought. The abstract thought, he says, is something like the way that great artists or philosophers think, or people that are mathematicians that are propounding new equations, or an artist that is creating a beautiful painting. There's something beautiful and noble about these abstract thoughts, which contain feelings too. As opposed to that, he talks about cut-off thoughts. Cut-off thought is a defense against feelings and undesirable aspects of the self. Abstract thought is a result of a highly integrated spiritual state. So every thought has feelings. That's interesting. It's something to think about. Usually we don't, that usually is not something we think about, that we believe. I find it to be a kind of a new kind of way of looking at things. Also, he says that the abstract thoughts are not subjective. There's something in which we unify with a creative state, kind of a higher plane of existence where we have these abstract thoughts. He says, a purely abstract, as its underlying energy current. Oh, someone else has joined us. Getting busy. Allison. As its underlying energy current, abstract thought contains a feeling of immense peace, of an intrinsic understanding of universal law that is bound to induce joyousness and bliss. A purely abstract thought would create this kind of energetic or feeling experience. A subjective thought is one that is created from personal desire and personal fear, from a state of egotism and separation, me versus the other. It is therefore never in truth. So I think that it's quite interesting how the guy talks about these two different kinds of thought. Subjective thoughts, which are about the ego, abstract thoughts, which are some sort of a way to unify with the universal consciousness, creative spirit. I mean, I do feel that makes a lot of sense, because when scientists or artists describe their creative process, that's what they're talking about. Something kind of just descends on, they feel a feeling of peacefulness or joy, and they realize something, which is not subjective, right? I mean, how many times do great artists or musicians say, it's not from me, something is working through me? All right, then the guy talks about, hi, everybody, if you just joined us. Allison, good to see you. Deborah. Guy talks about desire, um, good and bad desire. Desire is something that impels us to move forward, but it also can be subjective from the ego. So to skip ahead a little bit, the guy talks about 3 stages of consciousness. The state of slumber, where being does not know it exists. It has no self-awareness. It can feel and move and grow, and even to some extent think, but below the threshold of self-awareness, like a mineral or a plant. But they follow a plan. Plants follow a built-in plan, and so do animals. The consciousness somehow created that plan, created the imprint with all its lawful cycles by which the organism lives, expands, dies, reincorporates itself, gives birth to itself, expresses itself, and goes on in that same cycle. This requires an immensely intelligent plan that only consciousness could fabricate. Something like this cannot happen by itself. Sure, of course.
So in reading this, I'm thinking when it talks about consciousness here, and then also in the part where it says consciousness making a decision to not be aware and solidifies or whatever. So in this slumber state or whatever, the least developed state, it seems to me, I'm trying to, that the consciousness creates this, but is it a consciousness of an individual consciousness, or is it like a universal consciousness?
That's a good question. That's a complicated question.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
Kevin, have thoughts about that?
You give me the easy one, Sal.
Yeah.
Well, my thought is that in a sense, there's very little difference between collective or universal. And that's what this lecture is pointing to, is that even in all the grains of sand on the beach, you can still walk on them and get to where you're going, right? There's a collective, like, and unified purpose to all of the individual grains. And so what's happening in evolution, or how science can see this kind of raising of consciousness out of the mineral earth into life and so forth, is not this like, oh, magic happened. No, magic didn't happen. It was already alive. That's what it's saying. It's already alive. The very nature of stars giving birth to planets, giving birth to what we think of as dead matter, Mars or whatever. But these are not dead things, even if we call them dead because we don't see human life there. So it's basically saying that life was already here. We didn't need it to be transported here. This planet is alive. All of the individual constituents are alive, and the natural process of that is to continue to develop life and evolve life into newer, larger forms, which is just natural for life to seek in this stage of becoming. That's kind of what it's hinting at. Now, I know I'm talking in doubles maybe sometimes, or it's hard to hear, but I don't think there's one answer of, is it someone sitting on a throne going, please give life there?
maybe-
I don't think it's that at all. I think it's
it
much
could
more
be
than
created
that.
natural
Yeah,
process. I think he
What
does
you
explain
talked
more
about,
that.
what you talked about, Barbara, this whole decision of consciousness to create inanimate matter is very interesting. This is a big theme in the lectures. He says, when consciousness creates in a certain direction, the life spark slows down and down until the energetic stream petrifies. It
Yeah.
condenses into such a thick crust that the underlying energy is invisible, that is not perceivable with the human eye. However, beings whose expanded state of consciousness makes them capable of perceiving more than the surface can observe very clearly the highly potent energy aspect within inanimate matter, which has no manifest consciousness. But such beings can also perceive the consciousness content within this potent energy, the consciousness contained within the outwardly dead material. What does such consciousness, quote unquote, say when it's a slumber? It may say, I do not want to know. I do not want to know me in relationship to the world around me. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting. Well, is that rock over there saying, I don't want to know?
I will say it says one more thing besides that.
Go ahead.
It says, I am here. That's all it's really saying, in that I don't want to know myself, because it can be molded by those that know, okay, who have some knowledge of themselves. So the lecture goes into that about art, especially it goes into this, about that the nature of a higher consciousness, or at least the consciousness of becoming, let's say, can mold and work with the other conscious material. So the paint that you put out onto the canvas is living, and you have elevated it by utilizing it in a way that it would not choose on its own.
That's a very interesting way to put it. So,
Do you resonate with that? That was, yeah, I resonate. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
From a painter.
Mhm.
And I feel like I've lost my connection to the paint, so I can get it back. But,
yeah, go ahead, Nana.
yeah, but the thing is, this is very confusing to me, because it sounds like matter that it has form of crust has an intent to be asleep, but that to me is relegated to consciousness that has choice and can
Right.
make decisions. So
Yeah.
does that mean, I mean, it's like a contradiction to me. You know, I
Well,
didn't
I
understand.
don't think necessarily. I mean, we're talking here about all the lectures are really about choices. It's all about how consciousness can choose things. But we'll keep on talking about it. I mean, the guide earlier says, I think that the potency of consciousness is greater than any other energy. It's greater than nuclear, greater than fossil fuels, greater than any other kind of energy, which is very interesting when you think about it, because I've always believed that, if a nuclear bomb goes up,
Yeah.
8 million people can be vaporized, and no matter what their consciousness is. But then again, we created the nuclear weapons. And the guide, of course, talks about to follow up on this discussion about matter and about inanimate things, that we use those things and create objects out of those things with our consciousness. In other words, it's not a process of snapping your fingers and all of a sudden a hammer appears. You decide on what to create, and then you use materials and create those things. And then those things have a particular life. I've heard this said in other spiritual traditions, right? That, I mean, if you create a tool with a lot of love and a lot of energy and use it lovingly, it has some kind of a presence
Yeah.
that another tool would not have.
Correct.
How do you define consciousness?
Well, I mean, he says that consciousness is present in everything that has energy.
Energy.
But I didn't ask, where is it?
This
How do you
expressed through
define it?
feelings, he
What is
said.
it?
Well, I mean, that's what we're talking about. In other words, consciousness is not only self-awareness, it's more than that. He says that there's three stages of consciousness. One is not self-awareness. The other is what we have, our self-awareness, and then there's universal consciousness. So I guess it's just the way that energy is actualized in objects and
See, I think
People-
of it as a divine energy.
Yeah, it's a force,
Yeah.
it's divine energy,
Yeah.
that's how I perceive
Yeah,
it.
Yeah.
I would say that's the simplest way of
That's-
saying it.
Yeah,
But you raised an amazing point before when you said that does it have the intent of staying asleep? But what's important, it's hard, I wrestle with that actually when you said that, but it states very clearly that it's being, then becoming, then being. So the becoming part is where we are, and we can
Right.
easily project becoming on the things that are just being.
Right.
So those things, I don't know if they're intended, because intention is a process of becoming. We can't say something that is being has an intention per se.
Mhm.
and to say
follow?
they follow a path.
exactly. And that has to do also with
They
what
just are.
he says about purity.
Right,
Purity,
right,
because
right. That
In
was,
a sense,
that
the
connects, yeah.
inanimate objects are in a pure state.
Yeah.
They have no ability to actualize. We're in a combination of a pure and impure state. That's what the whole process of self-transformation, the whole process of self-facing is about, is to purify ourselves so that we are able to dispel those negative or go through the negatives. And then, of course, at the next state, it's another state of purity, of
Yeah.
universal
Yeah.
consciousness. And
Conscious
also
purity.
very interesting.
I just want to add something that Juan normally brings up is surrender here.
Mhm.
Because to me,
Yeah.
that purity
Yeah,
of the table or the elements, that's a surrender that this part of God's consciousness has chosen. Okay,
Both
at one
sides of that,
point, to
yeah.
be fully open to whatever can come, whether or not it's a nuclear blast
yeah.
or a beautiful artwork. Okay,
Yeah.
there's a huge area that, I mean, this table doesn't know ultimately before it's a table what it's going to be. It was wood.
Yeah.
Okay, but it is a purity of intent, which is a surrender. And
Yeah.
when I look at these kind of things, it just surrendered to be used,
Yeah.
which is a beautiful thing.
And you surrender,
In
that
purity.
it's divine consciousness can infiltrate
Yeah.
and then use you as the instrument.
It's just availability.
Yeah.
That's how I
Okay.
see it.
Yeah.
All right, so here again, he talks. This is a very key paragraph here, bottom of page 4. The second state is self-awareness, which begins at the human level. What does self-awareness mean? Awareness of, quote, I am, I exist, I can think, I can make a decision. My decisions have impact. My thoughts have effect. My feelings reach other beings. This will be roughly the second state, is the state where self-responsibility begins. The awareness of having an effect on the world around the self must result in accountability and the seriousness of choosing thoughts, attitudes, actions, and responses. So now that's a pretty heavy thing to drop on us. The seriousness of
Yeah, the most difficult.
choosing thoughts, attitudes, actions, and responses. That's a big burden, in a sense. I mean, it's inescapable. And that's really the nub of the lecture, I think, is to make the right choices about increasing awareness and
Self-awareness.
trying to, I guess, cultivate abstract thoughts as opposed to subjective thoughts, as he said earlier. The state of consciousness below the threshold of self-awareness cannot make choices, as we just discussed.
Hmm.
Of course, Marianne. Go right ahead. Yeah, I hope you don't mind. We're recording. Everyone's on camera.
Uh, I think it's a kind of a naive question, actually.
Yeah,
But like the abstract thought, in theory, it has more power, right? Because it's more connected with the given.
I would think so.
But then the thing is, most people maybe in the earth are not having abstract thoughts every day. They're having very
Subjective thoughts.
subjective thoughts that are connected with their ego, with proud, with obstination. I don't know how to translate this from Portuguese, but yeah. So they're thinking about power, for instance, when we are talking about
Right.
nuclear bomb,
Right.
for instance. So why, like those people that have those thoughts that in theory has less energy than abstract thought, they can actually do so much, if they have less energy, let's say, if they are less connected with God and everything else, with the universe.
You're saying, why can't they do?
Why they have so much power?
Why they have so much power?
So-
Right, well,
That's what's happening now.
that's a very good question, and that
That
You
I
wanna
feel
talk
like is
about
in
that?
my
Because-
wheelhouse a little bit,
no,
honestly.
that's also
Because
something.
I've really meditated on this for quite some time. It's really the mass of the amount of consciousness which is at that level. So the more conscious entities that resonate at a given level within the human, let's say the human spectrum, that's a great word, within the human spectrum, at some point, because the mass is so large, the consciousness of the earth will be generally at that level, let's just say, or of the people that are here. And those nations or people, in this case, that appear to be a little bit more further along, will feel the tug backwards into, let's just say, the
The
less
cesspool.
conscious, the cesspool, maybe, yes, indeed. But also what happens over time, and this is one thing to add hope to it, is that even those nations that fight, or those people that fight against the cesspool, realize that fighting against the cesspool is not necessary. The place
Lower
of
vibration.
the lower vibration. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. The lower conscious. It's all for a purpose. So everyone that you can see as being lower in a sense, or I wouldn't choose
Not as
that,
developed.
not as developed, then this serves a purpose to the collective evolution of the earth as
And
well.
that's an abstract version
And
as
that's an
opposed,
Yes,
abstract
yes.
version, yes.
Yes.
of it.
as opposed to getting in there and
Yes.
fight.
Yeah, and saying, no, we need this, damn it. Then you're
Yeah.
you went down to the same
Exactly,
thing.
resisting it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well,
Everything serves a purpose.
well, it's the
Yeah.
second part of the lecture. I mean, it's also about the
Hence the growth. Hence the growth.
that's really what the second part of the lecture is, the self-limiting nature of evil. You read, that's what it talks about. Basically, it says that
Yeah.
when people try to turn the creative energy into evil directions, they become blind, deaf, and numb, and it basically becomes self-limiting. And that's what he says. And it may be hard to see that sometimes, but that's what the guide says here.
No.
So
You saw on, let's see which page you want. So if you move.
hey, Marianne, you there?
To the third state. If you move into the third state.
What page are you on?
Well, your
It's,
pages are different
five.
than mine.
5.
So the third state, this third state, the highest state of the three, that paragraph. You go down, that's 1, 2, 3, 4 the fourth paragraph after that,
Mhm.
it says. However unjust an evil manifestation may now appear to you, it only appears that way because in your limited time-bound state, you are not in possession of the connections. Were you thus aware, you would see that all negative manifestations, and this goes back to your what you're asking about, no matter how cruel or unjust they may seem, are self-created medicine for the purpose of ultimate purification and ultimate bliss. Evil does not and cannot destroy. It can only do so. It can do so only temporarily
Yes.
and within the
Yes.
framework
Yeah.
of what I just.
And I have one
It's a
small thing to that, and that is
Rated.
that we were at that state too.
Well,
Never deny that we were a murderer or a person that we would point the finger and say, how dare you be like that now? Don't you know what the collective consciousness is calling for? Okay. But we were that person.
We could be, and we could be.
Well,
We could be
still
that now.
connect to
Yeah.
that feeling.
Well,
Yes.
and
Of
also
wanting to act that way.
Hello.
the
Beautiful,
stuff,
beautiful.
So true.
the stuff that we point at the most is what actually needs the most healing in ourselves.
Hence the medicine, right?
Yeah, so the things that you're most triggered by are actually the things that you're subconsciously wanting to heal, but you're not consciously aware of them. And that's why you're triggered by them. I don't know, something else came to mind for me, which was like the two main forces in the universe are destruction and creation, which is what we would call good and evil. So evil is just destruction, and creation is what we would consider good. And but even destruction serves a purpose for creation. The example that was coming to mind was like, you know how the Indians used to burn the forests so that they could like grow crops. So that would be an example of like how destruction can then lead to creation.
Well, I'm not sure if I totally agree with that. Destruction, I mean, when you talk about destruction, you're talking about like natural processes, like a star exploding, or you're talking about,
Well, there's a wide range of destruction, right? I mean,
Yes.
there's a very
I mean, destruction can be creative
well, that's what I'm saying.
also and valuable because of like the lecture about crisis, that crisis creates change. When things get to a certain point, the
Yeah.
old forms have to be destroyed to make room for something that's new.
Right.
That's right.
So then destruction is positive.
Right.
Yeah.
Correct.
But I think the essence of what we're talking about here is that evil is self-limiting and that evil is the medicine. I mean, let's hear it. Ladies and gentlemen, nothing bad ever happens to us. The bad things are medicine that we can work on, use to transform ourselves. I mean, it may appear bad, but it's something that all the evil and negativity is medicine to correct itself. Right? I mean, that's
Yes.
a very important part of the pathwork. Like but it's easy to misinterpret it. Like, I can think of any number of things I've said that have really pissed people off when I kind of say, well, you need this experience because it'll make things better. You got to take your medicine. Right? I mean, it's
They may not want to use that, but
like if you're in AA, I mean, you're taking your medicine
Right.
to face your addiction. That's it. All right. So maybe there's a few more parts of the lecture we can talk about, and then we can share more ideas about this. Yeah, of course. The desire. Yes, we can talk about that.
The third page for me. Let us, for example, examine desires. So my question here is, because it defines like a strong desire that's actually coming from the ego versus a desire that comes from creation, from consciousness and like union. But the thing is, like, when we feel a very strong desire, sometimes we are not so able to walk away from that, right? And is like making us like go away from the abstract thought and into the like egocentric thought, I guess. I don't remember the name, cut off. thought. And then how can we like actually stop this process, you know? In this case, if you have like a very strong desire, like, and then you're like, okay, I don't know, I wanna do something because of power, because I wanna have power, for instance. And how do you walk away from that and go back to the abstract thing? Because, okay, sorry, my question is around sometimes something happened in your life and that moves your thoughts. So you were like, okay, I'm in this very spiritual moment and like doing my meditation or whatever, and then something happened and cut this process and brings you to something way more physical, way more like ego driven and everything else. How do you handle that and go back to the abstract thought, or go back to like consciousness and like union and everything else?
But yeah, go ahead, Mary, because
Yeah, I was
there's
just
two kinds
thinking,
of desire, right? So
yeah, but I was thinking when you get caught in the power thing or the ego thing,
Mhm.
having the concept, being able to apply the concept of going higher and looking at the whole thing. It's like, got away from me, got away from me.
You
That's
stop
okay.
your-
I'll believe in that. What do you think?
You stop yourself and take a look from
Well,
the big picture.
it's like the guide always says, watch yourself, don't try to change what you're doing, watch yourself doing it. And
Sure.
look at the results, experience the results, let yourself feel the results. And sooner or later, you will get tired of those results, and
Right,
sometimes you
and
won't want to
maybe
do
you
that
can-
anymore.
that'll help you tell the difference between those two kinds of desire.
Yeah, and
Yes,
that's that,
yeah.
because the
Understand?
thing is,
Right,
when you do something, very often it's mixed desire.
right.
I mean,
Sure.
I've spent my life chasing chimeras, but saying I want to give my best, I want to do my best. So both of those were in there.
Exactly.
So does anyone from cyberspace want to comment? Your friends, you guys, would you like to say something, anyone? Allison, Debra,
I would like
Teresa?
to say something about her comment,
Oh, Chad, go ahead.
if nobody else does.
ahead.
So yeah, I think what she's asking is, basically this is the process of spiritual evolution, of the process of the evolution of consciousness. As you go up the totem pole of consciousness, you become less and less affected by outside events. And you have less of a tendency to go back to to be triggered by things and to have these negative tendencies for power and for lust, for ego, whatever. But um, it's sort of a natural part of the process of evolving your consciousness. So there's no point to really fight against it. Progress doesn't happen in a straight line or whatever. It's up and down, up and down. So, to me, like somebody like Jesus, right, is just using him as an example, or the Buddha, or any of these enlightened ascended masters, they're no longer affected by these outside events because they've evolved all the way to the top. And that's what, we're all doing, is we're evolving our consciousness so that eventually we won't get sucked back into these negative patterns. But right now we're not there. So it's just naturally we're going to be affected by what we perceive as negativity.
Yeah. Can I add one small
Yeah, sure,
thing
go
to
ahead.
that? And that is be patient when this arises.
I'm
Please
very
be patient.
patient.
Please be patient with yourself when this arises. Because, and you hit the nail right on the head with this, is that it's a natural process. And you're noticing this natural process at a place and you see something that's further than where you're at. So you won't go, oh, I wish I was there. Oh, I wish I was there, but I'm not there. But I wish I was there. Okay. And that's the tug of war that you feel in the moment. To me, what I tend to say is that awareness of those things, just like you were mentioning, is the key. Because once you have the awareness of it, you will embody that in time, but you cannot erase time's work. That's all. Can't be now.
Yeah, most people don't even have the awareness
Yeah.
of what's happening. Like the people you were describing, like the lower vibrational people that are here on Earth, they're not even aware that they're engaging in these type of tendencies. So once you're aware, you're already at a higher stage of development.
Yeah, if this helps, remember the Bible says resist not evil. And I really go back to that very often because I see plenty of it in me. Okay, but when it comes out, resist not evil. Because fighting it
Yeah.
is not the
It's
way
not,
to let
just accept
to let
and,
it go,
you know,
and let that
feel it.
desire
Whatever
go.
you resist, persist.
Yes, resist it not.
There's that thing of evil flourishes when good people do nothing.
Yes.
That sentence
Yeah,
constant
yeah.
all the time, so I'm in constant tug of war with myself.
Who do you think wrote that sentence?
I don't know.
Is it an ego? Who thinks that all there is this material
But it's
area?
not about doing nothing.
Yes.
It's about, you know, like, let's say,
True.
it's not about doing nothing
True.
really, because you know, you have to do something, but you have to,
Yeah.
whatever it is of you to do,
Yeah.
you'll be guided, you know, when you surrender to that inner spirit as what it is that you to do, as you are, you know, that you are supposed to do. Like, for example, I always think of Mother Teresa when they ask her, would you march against, I think something like this, would you march against evil or something like this? You say, no, but I will march for love.
Exactly.
You see what I mean? It's not going against, it's going with the good energy, the positive of it. What creates. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because fighting the darkness, we just gonna get you exhausted and you're not gonna get anywhere.
I'm responding to your question in a very practical way, like, what do I do? You know, kind of thing. And it sort of reminds me of just the very beginning of this lecture, talking about consciousness and energy, creating and being, you know, the same thing. And that if your energy is in a desire that you don't, you know, that you don't want, that you have an aspiration for a different kind of desire or a different, you know, that I think part of it is the realization and the consciousness of this is where my energy's at now, and being able to harvest that energy. And it's sort of like when did you ever use the batakas, or when you're really angry about something and you use these rubber bat, you know, the bats, and you say, I'm angry, right? Hey, what?
Hit the pillow loud.
Hit the pillow, right? So that it's like, oh my God, it's like there's so much energy there, and it's like using, you know, getting me connected to that energy, and then using whatever consciousness you can to direct it. So that's my.
Thank you.
Thank
So,
you.
is anyone online want to say something? Guys? Beverly, Allison, Gerbo, Marion?
Well,
Marion.
I will say something to just to connect with everyone. And so much wisdom has already been shared. I don't have much to add to that, except something that came to me is something that I have fun with. And fun is an important aspect to remember to have fun while we're here. And that is that this physical world can all be traced back to earth, air, fire, and water, the four elements. Everything. And that's creation on this planet. And so I find it fun, and I did this with some school children who are like at least 7 years old, and where we would look at anything, and a brick in a building, a tire on a car, tracing it back to this four element, earth, air, fire, and water. Something had to be made in a factory. Well, where did that come from? Metal, the factory. How did it turn into objects in the factory? For fire, and often water. So it's a fun thing to do. So I want to stress about having fun in being here in creation, and which is very temporary. And that I could stand in a room and look at anything, a pencil, and do it with the kids. Take it back to how that pencil was made. Everything will go back to the four elements. Yeah. So I just wanted to add that as a aspect of having some fun.
Thanks, Marion. Thank you.
So if you think, so Baba Muktananda, one of the things who said, he wrote a book called The Play of Consciousness, and he said that all of what we're experiencing is this play of consciousness that's designed, and that we, you know, Pathwork says, we designed this contract, we designed who we're going to be with in this life. Remember the last lecture, it said how detailed this plan is, and beyond what the guide can even explain to us, right? We can't even comprehend how detailed this plan is before we ever got here. And part of that design is time. So for people who don't believe in the eternal, in the infinite nature of quote unquote time existence. So some places we're taught that we've existed since the beginning of creation because we are consciousness, right? But in order to gain the most that we can from this human experience, the concept of time was created by whoever created this realm that we're in, so that there is some pressure there to perform, to advance, to do something like this. Because if we're at a lower level of consciousness and we believe that time is infinite, we're just going to play. What's the point of stop drinking, stop drugging, whatever the addiction is? I have forever, right? But if you layer onto the human existence the concept of time, that creates pressure that we don't have forever. But then once you get to another level of consciousness, I believe you realize, I mean, that was the enlightened masters, the message, that was one of Jesus's main messages for all humanity, that Christians claimed him, but he wasn't a Christian. He was a messenger from God for all people. And one of his main messages was that life is eternal, that death has no dominion over me. So that's my understanding of time. And the more, the lectures talk about the fact that those of us who can embrace the passage from life to our existence out of body, death, what we call death, that the more peaceful we are around that the chances are improved that we're not going to have to come back, that we're going to the next stage of existence, so that our whole concept around death and fear around that is an illusion that holds us back. And part of that is this concept of time, and it's limited, that we only have this life, we only have this time. That's not the truth. That's not the truth. That's part of this play that we're in.
Because it's form. Form has everything that arises passes away. So form is all forms, even rocks, right? Have a certain time period of existence, a limited time period. So when consciousness is identified with form, which is how we tend to be, then that is where the fear of death comes in, and where the time, it feels like, I'll be done, I'll be over. But all that's going to happen when we die is the consciousness is going to disassociate with the current form. I just think about it almost like taking your clothes off at night, and you're still there. You've got, the next day you put on different. So I just think consciousness is no longer uniquely identified with the current form that it is while we're sort of incarnate. Where most of the time consciousness is identified with, I'm a woman, I'm the, whereas when that form meets the end, which all forms will, then that consciousness sort of separates. And it's like, oh, I'm not just, it's, and if you, in that sense, there is, see, time is a construction of and space of a physical form. But when you don't have, when consciousness is sort of free floating, not identified with a specific limited form, then there's, time and space become meaningless.
Yeah. Hence form becomes meaningless. Hence also past is no different from future, because all is now. So that's the thing that I go back to when I hear what the guide said. It's not necessarily saying that the creation of time in a real way is due to our thought, although it might very well be. But what it's really saying is that we characterize past as different than future. Future is where our hopes lie, where our efforts are to make better, etc. Past is what we regret as an ego. Okay.
Right.
So having these delineations are meaningless, really, unless you're an ego. Or an animal has no delineation of this.
No.
A universal consciousness has no
Right.
delineation of this. It's
No.
always eternally now.
Right.
So it's the
It's
delineation
the
of time.
ego consciousness. that
It's the
has-
meaning of time,
Yeah.
and that comes from being individualized anyway in the
Exactly.
sleep state.
Exactly.
So, like you're saying, the limits of material or
Yeah.
minerals.
Yeah.
This
And-
is a thing, and so as soon as it gains some level of human consciousness in the future, it will go, "Wow, I'm a thing."
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm a thing. What's a
And
thing?
I'm
You know,
vulnerable.
That's awful, and I'm vulnerable.
And I'm vulnerable, and this can hurt
Yeah,
me,
yeah. Yeah.
fire, you know. So
Yeah.
it's-
So
it's
yeah.
Okay. All right, everyone.
actually
So
just light anyway,
For what?
vibrational light that appears
Okay.
as solid.
thanks. So does anyone want to chime in from far-flung regions of cyberspace? I'm getting shakes of hands. I just wanted to reflect on what the guy's saying in page 7, which is the kind of how knowledge turns into revelation. How after you start learning about yourself, you start working on this path of self-facing, then first there's knowledge on a mechanical level. But that knowledge is not insight, wisdom, true perception. It does not give you a sense of wonder and awe, nor does it fill you with peace and joy. It is dry, cut off knowledge. I'm talking about a different kind of knowledge in which a kind of comprehension takes place that unites fragmented understanding. It is a deep and feeling knowledge that indeed brings peace, joy, awe, and excitement. A revelation fills you that removes all dissension. You experience and relate in a new way, but this only comes much later on the path, my friends. At first, you will experience the beginnings of this kind of knowledge only occasionally. It manifests much more when you are, for instance, in a helper position.
That's an interesting.
So that's an interesting comment. I think he basically is saying there that the Pathwork helpers, the people that take on a greater commitment, feel that kind of connection, that kind of knowledge more than other people. In other words, I guess it makes sense, right? You get out what you put in. And here he says, another paragraph I'll read. What I told you in this lecture is specifically designed to make you aware of the potency of your thoughts and of the potency of each thought that you decide to think, each attitude you decide to adopt. Thought will create experiences and responses, and will also create within you. There, it will either create a new energy field or will enforce, reaffirm, and fasten an old one, depending on whether the thought or intent is new or is a repetition of the old. When you are truly conscious of this potency, you become more responsible and more capable of creating. You then approach the state in which you know that God consciousness is within everything. The ego only decides which way to turn. Right now, within your thinking mind is the potentiality to express God's consciousness any way you choose. And when your experience is negative, make sure to find out what created it and how it was created.